The Forgotten Road. David had always been the adventurous type, the kind of father who believed in making memories with his children, Emma and Sam, through spontaneous road trips and unexpected detours. In August 2023, it was a sunny Saturday morning when he announced their journey to visit their grandparents in rural Oregon, a trip that had become a cherished tradition for the family. The kids, still sleepy but excited, packed their essentials as David loaded the car. "Let's try something different this time," David suggested, his eyes twinkling with a mix of mischief and excitement. "There's a shortcut I've heard about that goes through the forest. It's supposed to be beautiful this time of year." Emma, 16, always up for an adventure, grinned in agreement, while Sam, 12, a bit more reserved and sensitive, looked apprehensive but nodded, trusting his father's judgment. The promise of a new route was intriguing, an uncharted path that promised new sights and experiences. As they drove away from the familiarity of the city, the landscape transformed dramatically. The concrete jungle gave way to sprawling greenery, and soon they were surrounded by the towering presence of Oregon's dense forests. The road became narrower and less maintained, with the canopy of trees casting long shadows that danced across the car's path. The beauty of the forest was undeniable, but there was an eerie stillness that hung in the air. David, ever the optimist, dismissed it as the usual quiet of nature, focusing instead on the road that seemed to wind endlessly through the woods. Emma, her eyes glued to the window, took in every detail: the way the moss hung from the trees, the occasional deer darting across the road, the distant sound of a river. But Sam felt something different. His imagination, always vivid, painted the shadows between the trees with a sense of foreboding. He kept his thoughts to himself, not wanting to worry the others, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone in the forest. The afternoon sun began to wane, and with it, the forest seemed to change. A thick fog started to roll in, enveloping the car in a ghostly embrace. David slowed down, squinting to see the road ahead. The GPS, which had been their guide, suddenly lost its signal, leaving them with nothing but the narrow road ahead. "Probably just a glitch," David muttered, more to himself than to his children, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. That's when the car gave a jolt, a sputter, and then silence. The engine had died. They were stranded in the middle of an unknown forest, with night approaching and a fog that seemed to swallow everything around them. David tried to start the car again, to no avail. He turned to his children, his face a mask of calm. "It's okay, I'll go look for help. You two stay here, keep the doors locked, and don't leave the car. I'll be back as soon as I can." Emma nodded, trying to appear brave for her younger brother, while Sam clutched his backpack, his eyes wide with fear. As David stepped out into the fog, the children watched him disappear into the mist, leaving them alone with the sounds of the forest and the feeling of being watched from the shadows. Hey, quick reminder, don't forget to subscribe and like for more videos. In the car, the atmosphere grew thick with tension. Emma tried to distract Sam with stories and jokes, but the eerie silence outside was overwhelming, seeping through the cracks of their bravado. The fog pressed against the windows, creating patterns that danced and shifted in the dimming light. Every sound seemed amplified: the rustling of leaves, the creaking of branches, and something else. A faint, unidentifiable noise that seemed to be coming from just beyond their line of sight. Emma peered out, squinting to see through the fog. "Do you see that?" she whispered, her voice tinged with a mix of curiosity and fear. Sam, huddled in his seat, shook his head, not wanting to look. But Emma's eyes were fixed on a shadow that seemed to move independently of the trees. A fluid, dark shape that was neither animal nor human. Meanwhile, David, armed only with his phone's flashlight, ventured deeper into the forest. The fog made it hard to see, and every direction looked the same. He tried to keep a mental note of his path, but the forest seemed to shift around him, disorienting him further. A growing sense of unease crept over him, a feeling that he was not alone in the forest. Back in the car, the temperature seemed to drop. Sam wrapped himself in a blanket, his ease never leaving the window. "I wish Dad would come back," he murmured. Emma, trying to maintain a facade of courage, nodded in agreement, but instead she was battling her own fears. She remembered stories of the Oregon forests, tales of spirits and creatures that lurked in the unexplored depths. Without warning, the car lights flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. Emma fumbled for her phone, her fingers trembling as she turned on the flashlight. The sudden light cast eerie shadows inside the car, further unsettling them. They could hear something now. A soft dragging sound like something heavy being pulled across the forest floor. David, feeling increasingly anxious, decided to head back to the car. He had walked far enough, and there was no sign of any help. He quickened his pace, but the more he walked, the more he felt like he was getting further away from his children. Panic began to set in. Had he lost his way? In the car, Emma and Sam were now certain that they were not alone. The sounds outside were getting closer, more deliberate. Emma whispered, "We should check if Dad is coming." But as she reached for the door handle, the car shook violently, as if something large had bumped into it. They screamed, huddling together, their hearts racing. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the shaking stopped. The forest fell silent once more. A silence that was more terrifying than the noise. They sat there, frozen, not daring to move or make a sound, listening to the thumping of their own hearts. It was in this moment of stillness that Emma and Sam realized the gravity of their situation. They were lost in an unfamiliar forest. Their father was missing, and something unexplainable was lurking just outside their sanctuary. The adventure they had embarked on had turned into a nightmare, and they were trapped in its grip, with no idea how to escape. In the oppressive silence of the forest, Emma and Sam clung to each other, the only source of comfort in the midst of their growing terror. Each passing moment stretched into an eternity, their breath shallow, eyes fixed on the windows clouded by the dense fog. Suddenly, a series of soft, deliberate taps against the car window shattered the silence. Emma and Sam froze, their eyes wide with fear. The tapping was rhythmic, almost intentional. Emma mustered all her courage and slowly turned her flashlight towards the window. What she saw made her blood run cold. A set of pale, elongated fingers were trailing along the glass, belonging to a shadowy figure obscured by the fog. Panicked, Emma turned off the flashlight, plunging them back into darkness. They could hear a faint, guttural growling sound accompanying the movement outside. The reality of their situation became painfully clear. They were not alone, and whatever was outside was not just a figment of their imagination. Inside, the fear was palpable. Sam, paralyzed with fright, whispered, "What do we do, Emma?" Emma, though scared herself, knew they couldn't stay in the car forever. They needed to find their father, to escape this nightmare. "Stay close to me," she instructed, her voice barely above a whisper. "We'll move quietly, try to find Dad, and get out of here." Heart pounding, she cautiously unlocked the car door. As they stepped out into the fog, the forest seemed to engulf them, the trees towering like silent sentinels. They could barely see a few feet ahead, and every sound seemed amplified in the eerie stillness. They moved slowly, trying to retrace the path their father might have taken, guided only by the faint light of Emma's phone. The growling sound was closer now, a constant reminder of the danger lurking in the shadows. The children quickened their pace, fear driving them forward. They called out softly for their father, but their voices seemed swallowed by the fog. As they delved deeper into the forest, the sense of being followed intensified. They could feel eyes watching them, a presence just beyond their sight. The growling grew louder, more menacing, and they could hear the sound of heavy footsteps tracking their own. In a moment of sheer terror, they saw it. A massive, shadowy creature, with glowing eyes and an almost human-like form, emerging from the mist. It moved with a predatory grace, its gaze fixed on the children. They ran, adrenaline fueling their desperate flight, the creature in pursuit. The chase was relentless. They stumbled over roots, their breath ragged, the creature's growls echoing in their ears. They didn't know where they were going. All that mattered was escaping the monstrous being behind them. Then, ahead in the distance, they saw a glimmer of hope. An old, abandoned cabin, its door ajar. With the last of their strength, they rushed towards it, slamming the door shut behind them. They were safe, for the moment, but trapped in an ancient structure that held its own dark secrets, unaware that their true ordeal had only just begun. Inside the cabin, Emma and Sam huddled together in the dim light. The air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. The cabin, abandoned and forgotten, was like a relic from another time, filled with old furniture and faded photographs on the walls. It was a place heavy with memories, yet devoid of life. Outside, the sounds of the creature prowled around the cabin, a constant reminder of the danger just beyond the wooden walls. The children were trapped, but for the moment, they were safe. They took deep breaths, trying to calm their racing hearts. Emma, with a bravery born of necessity, began to explore the cabin. She found an old newspaper, its pages yellowed with age, with headlines speaking of disappearances in the forest, tales of a haunting presence that had plagued the area for generations. This cabin, it seemed, was at the heart of these legends. Sam, meanwhile, was drawn to a collection of strange artifacts on a shelf. Among them, he found an old journal, its pages filled with the ramblings of someone who had once lived in the cabin. The writing spoke of a creature in the forest, a guardian of sorts, tied to the land and its history. The more they read, the more they understood the nature of what pursued them. Their exploration was interrupted by a sudden, loud banging on the door. The creature was trying to get in. Emma and Sam pushed a heavy table against the door, barricading themselves inside. They knew they couldn't stay there forever, but for now, it was their only protection. As the night wore on, the sounds outside grew more desperate, more aggressive. The creature was relentless, but it could not enter the cabin. There was a sense of rules, of boundaries it could not cross. In the midst of their fear, a new sound pierced the night, a familiar voice calling out to them. It was David, their father. He had found them. Emma and Sam moved the table, opening the door to find their father, exhausted and relieved. David hugged his children tightly, his eyes filled with tears of fear and relief. He explained that after getting lost in the forest, he had stumbled upon an old ranger station and managed to get directions back to the road. He had been trying to lead the creature away from them, to protect them. With the first light of dawn peeking through the trees, the forest seemed to change. The fog lifted, and the sounds of the night faded away. The creature, bound to the darkness, retreated into the depths of the forest, its presence fading as the sun rose. The family, united and stronger for their ordeal, emerged from the cabin. The forest, now bathed in morning light, seemed less menacing, more peaceful. They made their way back to the road, back to their car. The journey was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts, processing the events of the night. They reached the car, which to their surprise started without issue. David drove them away from the forest, away from the memories and the fear. As they left the forest behind, they looked back one last time, the cabin and the secrets it held disappearing into the trees, a part of the forest's mysterious and untold history. As David's car pulled away from the shadowed embrace of the forest, the family was enveloped in a profound silence, each member lost in their own thoughts. The morning light cast a different hue over the landscape, one that was less menacing, almost ordinary, but the memories of the night's terror lingered, like a bad dream that refused to fade away. The drive to their grandparents' house was a quiet one. Words seemed inadequate to describe what they had just experienced. David kept glancing in the rear-view mirror, ensuring that his children were safe, while Emma and Sam stared out the windows, their minds replaying the events of the night. Upon their arrival, their grandparents greeted them with warm hugs and worried looks, sensing that something was amiss. David, choosing not to alarm them, simply explained they had run into some car trouble. But as the family settled in, the weight of their experience hung heavily in the air. Later that evening, gathered around the fireplace, David decided it was time to share their story. He recounted the events, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. Emma and Sam chimed in, their accounts filling in the details of their harrowing night. Their grandparents listened, their expressions a mix of shock and understanding. "It's the forest," their grandfather finally said, his voice low. "There have been stories for generations, legends about a creature that guards the forest. They say it's tied to the land, a protector of sorts, but it doesn't take kindly to intruders." Their grandmother nodded, adding, "Many have seen it, but few speak of it. It's part of the lore of this land, a mystery that's never been solved." The conversation turned to the history of the area, tales of settlers, indigenous legends, and unexplained events. The family listened, captivated and unnerved, realizing that their experience was part of a larger, more complex tapestry of local folklore. In the days that followed, the family tried to return to a semblance of normalcy, but the shadows of the forest lingered in their minds. David took the car to a mechanic, who found nothing wrong with it, adding to the mystery of that night. Emma spent hours researching the legends of the forest, trying to make sense of what they had encountered. Sam, once afraid of his vivid imagination, now found comfort in it, processing his fear through drawings and stories. The family's bond had been strengthened by their ordeal, a shared experience that was both terrifying and unifying. They had faced something inexplicable, something that defied logic and understanding. As they prepared to leave their grandparents' house, David made a quiet decision. They would never take that shortcut again. The mysteries of the forest, its legends and its guardian, were to remain undisturbed. They drove away, the forest receding in the distance, a chapter closed in the story of their lives. The journey home was uneventful, the landscape passing by as they shared stories and laughter, the darkness of the forest replaced by the light of their togetherness. But in their hearts, they knew they had touched something ancient, something that existed beyond the veil of their understanding, and it had changed them in ways they could not yet fully comprehend. Months had passed since the family's harrowing experience in the Oregon forest, but the memories of that night lingered like a persistent echo. David, Emma, and Sam had returned to their everyday lives, yet there was an unspoken understanding among them, a shared connection forged in the heart of that ancient woodland. David found himself more protective than ever, his experiences in the forest having rekindled a deep-seated sense of guardianship over his children. He often caught himself gazing out the window, his mind wandering back to the shadowy paths and the enigmatic creature that haunted their steps. The experience had left him with more questions than answers, a puzzle that he could turn over in his mind, but never solve. Emma, now more curious and brave, had developed a keen interest in folklore and mythology. She spent hours in the library, poring over books and online articles, searching for stories similar to their own. She found tales of forest spirits and guardians from different cultures, each story weaving a tapestry of belief and legend that transcended borders and generations. These studies became a source of strength for her, transforming her fear into fascination. Sam, once timid and reserved, had found a new outlet for his emotions through art. His drawings, once filled with the ordinary imaginings of a child, now took on a more profound depth. He sketched scenes of the forest, the cabin, and the ethereal creature, his art becoming a bridge between his inner world and the experience that had so deeply affected him. His parents and sister often found themselves drawn to his artwork, seeing in it a reflection of their shared ordeal. The family story, once confined to the walls of their home, gradually began to spread among friends and acquaintances. What had started as hushed conversations turned into a narrative that captivated listeners, each person adding their own interpretation and speculation. The tale of their encounter in the forest became a local legend in its own right, a modern-day addition to the lore of the region. As time passed, the intensity of their experience began to fade, softened by the routines of daily life. Yet, every so often when the wind rustled the leaves in a certain way, or a shadow fell just so, the memories would resurface, as vivid and palpable as on that fateful night. In the end, the family realized that their encounter in the forest was more than just a story of survival. It was a journey into the unknown, a testament to the power of legend and the enduring mystery of the natural world. They had touched something ancient and inexplicable, a part of the Earth's hidden narrative, and so they moved forward, carrying with them the knowledge that there are mysteries in this world that remain unsolved, wonders that lie just beyond the veil of understanding. The forest, with its shadows and secrets, had become a part of them, a chapter in their family's history that would be passed down through generations. A reminder of the thin line between the known and the unknown, the seen and the unseen. We have come to the end of our story. Subscribe and like the video so as not to miss the videos that we will upload in the future. I'll see you in the next story.